Good day, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on challenging Islamophobia, strategies for building inclusive communities. This webinar is organized to commemorate the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. My name is Rimsha Shahid, and I will be your host for this session. As you all might be aware that in recent years, there has been a significant increase in Islamophobia around the world, leading to marginalization, discrimination, and hate crimes against Muslims. It is essential to understand and address the root cause of Islamophobia and develop strategies to build inclusive communities where everyone feels safe and valued. This webinar aims to provide insights and practical tools to challenge Islamophobia and promote an inclusive community. This webinar will feature discussions on the impact of Islamophobia on Muslim communities, the role of media in perpetuating Islamophobic narratives, and effective strategies for challenging this very narrative at the individual as well as at community level. Our panel of experts will draw on their extensive knowledge and research to explore the various forms of Islamophobia and provide practical approaches for combating it. We will also discuss the importance of interfaith dialogue and collaboration in creating a more inclusive society. This webinar is open to everyone who wants to learn more about the very concept and contribute to building a more welcoming and inclusive community. We hope that this discussion will inspire meaningful change and encourage participants to take action in their communities to challenge Islamophobia and promote inclusivity. So without further delay, let's get started with our first speaker, Professor Oscar Pérez de la Fuente. He is a professor at the Carlos III University of Madrid and has held various roles throughout his career. Professor Oscar has served as a MEC Fellow at the Pompeu Fabra University, Secretary of the magazine Rights and Freedoms, Publications Coordinator of the Bartolomé de las Casas Institute, Library Coordinator of the Philosophy of Law Area, and Coordinator of the Cultural Pluralism and Minorities Workshop. His research has primarily focused on the theory of law, human rights, political philosophy, legal argumentation, equality and non-discrimination, cultural pluralism, and minority rights. Currently, his research interests are centered on the study of cultural diversity and theories of justice, pluralism of values and incommensurability, and legal interpretation and argumentation. Professor Oscar, I appreciate your presence in this webinar today. I welcome you to open the house by discussing how can cultural, political, and socioeconomic factors perpetuate Islamophobia and what strategies involving education, media, international mechanisms, and networks can be employed to combat Islamophobia and promote intercultural dialogue. The floor is all yours. You may now proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here today to speak about Islamophobia. I would like to share with you a brief presentation that I have prepared for my speech. I would like to begin with the definition of Islamophobia. This first appeared in an essay written by our Orientalist Etienne Dinet in 1922, and also was used by Edouard Said in English in 1988 in an article called Orientalism Reconsidered. I would like to use the concept of United Nations of Islamophobia, a fear, prejudice, hatred of Muslims and non-Muslims individuals that leads to provocation, hostility, and intolerance by means of threatening, harassment, abuse, incitement, and intimidation of Muslims and non-Muslims, both in online and offline worlds, motivated by institutional, ideological, political, religious hostility that transcends into structural and cultural racism, which touches the symbols and markers of being a Muslim. This is a United Nations definition provide. It's not exactly an official definition, but it's a working definition for United Nations of Islamophobia. I would like to explain the different types of the different consequences of Islamophobia with political injustice, inclusion, economic injustice, redistribution, and cultural injustice recognition. First, political injustice, inclusion. I am using a survey on Islamophobia by the Council of Europe. The main idea is that Muslims in the European Union feel excluded from economic, social, and cultural life. And the demands of Muslims to integrate are often unreasonable and inconsistent. This view also takes less importance to the idea that it's very important in my country, in Spain, that there is a Muslim heritage, there is a Muslim history in Spain. For example, in the city of Granada is very important. You know, in the south of Spain, we have Muslim culture, we have Muslim heritage from. This means that Muslim culture is part of the European culture. Okay, I would like to explain this political injustice with the idea of Giovanni Sartori in the multi-ethnical society. He has this idea in which Muslim immigrants cannot be integrated in Western societies because they don't separate religion from politics. And I think this is very controversial. I am against this view because it's very controversial. And I think I disagree with Sartori in this point. And I think Muslim immigrants can be integrated in Western societies. The next point is economic injustice, redistribution. For example, we have to accommodate Muslim immigrants in the access and provision to halal food, religious education in schools, planning permission for mosques, and so on. And we have to provide in the anti-discrimination bodies and the anti-discrimination legislation, we have to provide certain exceptions for the Muslim people. For example, we have a case in the European Court of Human Rights in which a primary school teacher who wants to wear a Muslim veil, this was considered proselytism and was considered against the law, was prohibited. I think this is a case of discrimination of the Muslim workers. And I think you cannot dismiss someone because she wears a Muslim veil. This could be a case of discrimination. Well, in my view, with cultural injustice, for example, some people consider that Muslims are perceived of threatening the secular nature of the French state or a threat to multiculturalism. And for example, there are some prejudice or stereotypes against Muslims. For example, with the questions of the right of women, there is a certain stereotype between Muslims and the equality of women. For example, in my country, there was an extreme right party who in its program, in its manifesto, says that they don't want to give fundings to parties who don't support equality of women. Religions who don't support the equality of women, referring to the Muslim religion. However, this extreme right party has no policies for equality of women. It's an excuse. For example, in the discussion of the Muslim veil, it's an excuse to criticize Muslims. And the real important issue is the integration of the Muslim immigrants in Western societies. The integration in economic aspects, in social aspects, in political aspects. Muslim veil is an excuse to criticize. I think the real important issue is the real integration of Muslim immigrants. Okay. About the report of the Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Religion about countering Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, is interesting because in this report, this rapporteur says that Islamophobia is intersectional. This means Islamophobia affects different causes of discrimination. For example, belief, religion, race, nationality, gender, migratory status, and ethnic origin. All of this is included in the term of Islamophobia. And it's not only one character, one single trait, no? And finally, this is my last slide. In the same report, he promotes certain actions to the different states. For example, fulfill obligations to prohibit any advocacy of religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence, or counter discrimination through law enforcement, including by eliminating the discriminatory profiling of Muslims and promoting fair policing, or provide resources to Muslim communities to invest in educational, mentoring, and leadership programs that can build resilience and skills to support social disadvantaged individuals. My last reflection will be that I think that we have to, in this question of Islamophobia, philosophy is important in order to understand the fallacy of generalization. This means that Islam is not monolithic. Islam is dynamic. There are plural Islams. There are not only one Islam, there are plural Islams. Islam is something complex, diverse, and sometimes in Western press, sometimes in Western media, Islam is something monolithic. This is not true. Islam is complex, Islam is diverse, and we cannot think that everyone in Islam thinks the same, have the same values. And I think we have to promote a world without hate, and of course, we have to promote a world without hate against Muslim people and against Muslim women. Okay, thank you very much.
So yeah, that was quite impressive presentation, Professor Oscar, and I second your opinion and would like to add that, as you have already mentioned, that economic injustices and stereotypes regarding women are pervasive issues that disproportionately affect Muslim communities under the narrative of Islamophobia. And these issues are multifaceted and deeply interconnected, and they have serious consequences for individuals, families, and entire communities as well. So yeah, you have really provided a comprehensive analysis of the cultural, political, and socioeconomic factors that contribute to Islamophobia. I will now move on to our second speaker, Dr. Obed Manwatkar. He is a notable theologian, interfaith-intercultural scholar, writer, peace, and justice activist. Dr. Obed has been working to promote religious harmony, cultural understanding, and social justice through his work in academia, writing, and activism. He believes that promoting interfaith dialogue and understanding is essential for building bridges between different communities. As an interfaith-intercultural scholar, Dr. Manwatkar has written extensively on topics related to religion, culture, and society as well. He has been involved in various activities to advocate for the rights of marginalized communities. His contributions serves as an inspiration for those who seek to promote a more peaceful and just world. Unfortunately, due to prior commitments, he is unable to join us live and has provided his recorded message for the webinar. I will now request the host to kindly play the recorded message, please.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Obed Manwatkar, and I'm grateful for South Asia Research Institute of Minorities for giving me an opportunity to speak on the given topic, challenging Islamophobia, strategies for building inclusive communities. Islamophobia is a contrived fear or prejudice fomented by the existing Orientalist global power structure. It is directed at a perceived or real Muslim threat through the maintenance and extension of existing disparities in economic, political, social, and cultural relations, while rationalizing the necessity to deploy violence as a tool to achieve civilizational rehab of the target communities, especially Muslims. Islamophobia reintroduces and reaffirms a global structure of discrimination through which resource distribution disparities are maintained and extended. If we trace the history of the term Islamophobia, it was first used in early 20th century. Uh, it emerged as a neologism in the 1970s. Its use increased during the 1980s and 1990s era. Anti-Muslim prejudice has grown so considerably and so rapidly in recent years that the new item Islamophobia in the vocabulary is needed. Meaning of the term continues to be debated and it is problematic. Several scholars consider Islamophobia to be a form of xenophobia or racism. If we see about the dimensions of Islamophobia, it's a there is a private Islamophobia, there is a structural Islamophobia, and there is a dialectal Islamophobia. The private Islamophobia is fear, suspicion, violent targeting of Muslims by individuals or private actors, use of religious or racial slurs, a mass protest or rallies or violence. The structural Islamophobia is like the fear and a suspicion of Muslims on the part of institutions manifested through the enactment and advancement of policies associated with a national security threat framed in a facially neutral fashion. Dialectal Islamophobia is the process by which the state policies legitimize prevailing misconceptions, mispresentations, and the tropes widely held by private citizens. Islamophobia manifests in a, a brilliant fashion. Islam is seen as a monolithic block, static and unresponsive to change. It is seen as a separate and other, not have values in common with other cultures, and is not affected by them and does not influence them. It is seen as inferior of the West, or barbaric, or irrational, primitive, and sexist. It is seen as violent, aggressive, threatening, supportive of terrorism, and engaged in the clash of civilization. It is seen as a political ideology used for political or military advantage. If we talk about specific acts of Islamophobia, there are like verbal threats, attacks on person, Islam or the culture, religious symbols, beliefs, and practices, either face to face or through media, print media, electronic media, or social media. Physical attacks on property, places of worship, people, especially those who display visible manifestation of their religious identity, such as women wearing hijab or niqab. Policies or legislation that indirectly target, disproportionately affect Muslims, unduly restrict their freedom of religion, such as bans on building mosques and the shrines. Discrimination in Islamophobia also propagates a discrimination in education, employment, or access to public goods, justify such practices, exclusion from mainstream society, ethnic and religious profiling, and police abuse, including some provisions of counter-terrorism policing, public pronouncement by some journalists and politicians that have stigmatized Muslims as a group and disregard their positive contribution to the communities and the countries in which they live. There are significant similarities between Islamophobic discourse and some pre-anti-Semitism notions, such as imagined threats of minority growth and domination, threats to traditional institutions and customs, skepticism of integration, threats to secularism, fears of sexual crimes, fears of misogyny, fears based on historical cultural inferiority, hostility to modern Western Enlightenment values, and so on. Islamophobia is an issue globally, and it has narratives on a notion of a divided society, such as Muslim minorities have been portrayed as a non-belonging and wanting to separate themselves from the rest of the society. This is the notion. Government policies in majority of the world have failed to ensure equal rights to all, forcing unemployment, poverty, and limited civic and political participation. And there is a rise of popular far right globally. So minorities often serve as scapegoats in times of economic and political crisis, even where they have lived for generations. There is a myth of Islamization or invasion which has been nurtured by xenophobic and populist parties that are on the rise across the world. There is a framework of Islamophobia, the framework which is especially 9/11 terrorist attacks, which literally drastically changed the public opinion towards Muslims. Uh, and uh, Muslims means exhibited by use of Islam by extremists. Media in the West have succumbed to reporting based on stereotypes to stigmatize Muslim population, informing counterterrorism measures that restrict liberties for all and negatively impact Muslim communities. There is a disintegration. Islamophobia as a symptom of the disintegration of human values, values such as non-discrimination, tolerance, freedom of thought, justice, solidarity, and equality. The causes of Islamophobia is like stands on historical memories from generation to generation, hatred against Jews for death of Jesus, against Muslims, a throwback of crusaders, invasions, occupations, and may on in many of the European countries, and on the other South Asian or Asian countries, it is about occupying something, a foreign invasion or something like a, something tracing out from the history, and okay, Islamic rule is coming back, and that's the threat has been produced all over uh, the Asian territory. In Europe, it's something different, and in Asian context, it's something uh, different, and so it's a rampant. The fear, the showing some historical memories here. So that is a fear which has been poured in public of non-Muslims. So there have been like events like terror attacks in Europe and the United States by Islamic extremists, such as 9/11, London subway, France, etc., are being uh, repeatedly quoted while propagating this, repeatedly framed like, okay, this is who Muslims are, this is how these things would be, and so there is a mega trend that uh, the trend is like Muslims are responsible for unemployment in Western countries, increased presence of Muslims in USA or somewhere uh, on other parts of the world. It's like emergence of the global Muslim identity. So like that is a threat which is being served, that it's happening. Islamization is happening. So basically historical memory, some past events in the history, and mega trends served by media and social media, and which is in common discourse. So I hope we make initiatives, and we are ready to, if there is something I can be helpful with my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, South Asia Research of Minorities, I'll be happy to do so. So thank you so much for giving me opportunity to speak, and all the best. I appreciate your work, and keep moving forward. Blessings. Thank you so much.
And we surely appreciate the views and opinions presented by Dr. Manwatkar. It is very well highlighted by Dr. Manwatkar that the narrative of Islamophobia has justified discriminatory policies and practices, which is definitely against human rights. And therefore, it is essential to challenge this narrative and promote a more nuanced and accurate understanding of the diversity of Muslim communities and their contribution to the society, for sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Manwatkar, for your views, the recorded message you have provided. Despite your commitments, we appreciate your presence in this webinar. Thank you. Let's now proceed with our third speaker, Dr. Abhay Kumar. He is a renowned writer, journalist, and social activist known for his contributions in promoting social justice and human rights. He has served his life to bringing awareness to issues affecting marginalized communities and advocating for their rights through his writing and activism. With a strong passion for social justice, Dr. Abhay Kumar has become a respected voice in the field, and his work has inspired many to take action towards creating a more equitable and just society. He has written various articles to challenge Islamophobia, which includes What is Islamophobia and Taliban, Media, and Islamophobia. His work has had a significant impact on the lives of many, and his contributions have made a difference in the fight for social justice. Dr. Kumar, thank you for joining us today. I would like to invite you to take the floor and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me first tell you the context of this Islamophobia. Last year in 2022, a resolution was passed in the United Nations, and March 15th was declared as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. So everywhere across the globe, at different regions, different parts, meetings, discussion, activities are happening, and people are debating Islamophobia, its problem, how to combat it. Let me first tell you that what is the definition of Islamophobia. Any term cannot be easily defined, and there is very little agreement on definition what Islamophobia is. But it can be said safely, and many people would argue that Islamophobia is some kind of hatred, hostility, fear towards Muslim and Islam. Islamophobia means that you have some kind of hostility, fear, prejudice against Muslims and Islam. However, the most important part is that this fear, this hostility, this stereotype, they are not based on concrete objective reality. For example, if you see a snake and if you are frightened of a snake, one can understand. But it is like that you are looking at rope and you perceive it to be a snake, something like that. A Muslim, the moment you see somebody having beard, having Muslim Arabic Persian name, going to mosque, wearing a particular dress, speaking a particular language, Islamophobic person start thinking that okay, that person is Muslim. If that person is Muslim, then he or she is fundamentalist. When he and she is fundamentalist, that means that he is also religious and his religion is not progressive. He is not secular. He is not modern. His or her society is frozen. There is little social change. They do not believe in humanity and world peace. They little care about development. And what they do, they are fanatic Muslim. They carry out acts of violence. They cannot live peacefully with their neighbor. They have more and more children. They change the demography of the country, and wherever they are in good number, they will be the threat to non-Muslim society. These are all perceptions. These are not reality. I have given you the example of a snake and rope. If Muslims were fundamentalist, if Muslims were violent, and if you have that feeling that they are violent, one can understand. But it is all imaginary, it is all perceived, and they are all coming out of stereotype. The question is that why most of non-Muslims believe like this? Why they hate Muslim? A large section of non-Muslim, why they have prejudice against Muslim? Edward Said and other people, they would argue that it is a discursive thing. It is a hegemony. For a long time, knowledge, information, histories, poetry, drama, they are constructed in a such a way that Muslim, Islamic figure, Islamic culture, they are portrayed negatively. There is a binary that West is progressive, West is secular, West is modern, West is forward looking, West is free, West enjoys freedom. On the other hand, everything that is pervasive, everything that is negative, they are all associated with Muslim. So they are all constructed. But if you read history carefully, if you read history critically, we will be able to recognize this fact that even the project of modernity cannot be separated from Islamic world, from the role played by Muslim intellectuals, activists. Several innovation they were done by Muslims. Friends, in India, in subcontinent, our history is also constructed in such a way that we have been fighting religious battle till today. The colonial historiography created a binary, Hindu and Muslim. The ancient period was depicted as the period of Hindu rule. The medieval period was depicted as Muslim rule. So history has been divided on the basis of religion. However, this is not true. In ancient period, which is being called as Hindu period, we have emergence of world religion like Buddhism. Buddhists and Brahmins, they fight like anything. Buddhism has been driven away from its own country, and Baba Sahib Bhimrao Ambedkar has said that there has been a counter revolution. If ancient India was Hindu India, then where do you place the history of Buddhism? Where do you place the history of Jainism? Where do you place the history, the culture, the civilization, life of Adivasis, Dalits, lower caste, and those people who are not living in Hindi heartland, the Dravidian culture, the Tamil culture? They have very little to share with Brahminical culture. So to say that ancient India was Hindu and Brahminical, that is totally wrong. Similarly, to say that medieval period was a Muslim period, that is also wrong. Why? Because Muslim rulers took control of different parts of India at different time. Their arrival in Sindh was in 8th century, while their campaign in south was in 16th century. So how could we say that 8th century South India was Muslim India? How could we say that 10th century South India was Muslim India? That is not true. And even historians have shown it that before the arrival of Muslims rulers, the Hindu communalists call them invaders, there has been a deep and long cultural contact between Indians and the Arabs, Persian and Indians. Indian medicine, Ayurveda and other things were very popular in the Arab world. Several doctors went there. The game Shatranj, chess was also taken from India to Arab world. Even the numbers were taken from India, from the subcontinent to Arab, and through Arab, these things spread to different parts of the country. So we will see that the influence of the Arabs, the trade route, intermarriage, they have been happening centuries back before the coming of Muhammad bin Qasim in Sindh. So Hindu communalist, Hindu fundamentalist and Muslim fundamentalist, they both try to follow the colonial history writing, historiography, to say, to accept the fact that ancient India was Hindu India and medieval India was Muslim India. That is not true. Even the Muslim rulers fight against each other. They fought against each other. So these complex histories have been erased, and the colonial historiography in the case of India has presented a stereotype that the real people of India are Hindus, and they have been defeated by the conquerors, by the invaders, Muslims, and they destroyed temple. They tried to destroy Hindu culture. But the fact of the matter is that many Sanskrit textbooks were translated during the Mughal period. During the Mughal period, several scholars, artists, poets were promoted, were given support by the Mughal state. And on the other hand, Muslim rulers, they also fought with each other for supremacy of the power. So the problem of Islamophobia is also historical, that we have constructed a history, and those history are being taught still in the books, and fundamentalist leader from Hindu community and Muslim community, they have accepted those narrative because they have suited the interest of the elite within the community. And we had, as a result of that communal understanding, partition. Before India and Pakistan was divided in 1930s, 1940s, we had a discussion of two-nation theory. How could India be called two-nation if Hindu community is so diverse and Muslim community is so diverse? How could be there two nations? I think anybody who has talked about Hindu as a separate nation and Muslim as a separate nation, they are wrong. Because even among Hindu community, there is a caste system. In Muslim society, caste may not be supported, upheld by the holy book Quran and by the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But Muslim society, nevertheless, has accepted, practiced, promoted, put in place, maintained the caste structure, because caste structure is not the game of one individual agreeing to play or giving it up. No, caste system is a social structure. If you are born in Ashrafiya caste, in Brahmin caste, in upper caste, your chances of getting jobs, promotion, recognition, respect will go high. But if you are born in lower caste, you will be made to suffer and discrimination will be done against you. So the first major task of ours should be that we must try to read history in proper context, and we must try to recognize the fact that society is diverse. Hindu society, Muslim society, they are not monolith, and they are divided on caste, class, gender, region, language. The problem both in India and Pakistan is very much the result of not recognizing diversity within. So we have to today take a place that we will maintain diversity, we will promote diversity, and we will work for social justice. People born in our society who are marginalized, who are subaltern, they must be brought up, they must be given equal rights. Our job at the same time, our commitment at the same time should also be to oppose hegemonic power, to oppose those institutions who are working against the poor countries, those institutions who are creating inequality. We have to also fight against them. So the fight has to be waged at multiple levels. We have to fight for the rights of human beings. Human rights, day-to-day activism is very important. In political field, we have to also fight for economic, social, and political rights. We have to democratize political structure. We have to democratize international financial institute, and our criticism of Western powerful financial institution does not mean that we are critical of West and we are critical of people living in Western countries. We love them. We believe in humanity. Americans, those living in America or Britain or any parts of the world, they are our brothers, and we are fighting against unequal institutions. And it is coincidence that these institutions are located in those regions. We have to carry forward the message of Jesus Christ that the poor, the deprived should be given their rights, they should be given dignity, and we have to work for humanity as a family. I would like to conclude by saying this last point, that as far as Muslim society is concerned, I can understand that there has been rise of Islamophobia all across the globe. Here in India, situation is also not very satisfactory. Through social media, internet, newspapers, television, you are aware of the fact that minorities today in our country are facing some kind of pressure, some kind of, what should I say, discrimination. And the rise of fundamentalist government in India, which believes in religious majoritarian politics, these are all responsible for suffering of minorities and laboring masses. We must fight against those who are playing majoritarian politics. But I have also one request to make before the elites within the Muslims community, that while we must criticize those powerful hegemonic institutions located in non-Muslim society, we should also try to democratize our own Muslim society. Because in the name of Islamophobia, there has been a tendency to silence the internal critique within the Muslim society. That should not be the case. That should not be accepted. We have to criticize those who are violating, who are oppressing Muslims. At the same time, we have to also promote the debate around caste, around gender within the Muslims community. Be it India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or in South Asia, we understand that Hindu or Muslim society, it is not egalitarian. Women are not given equal rights, and some regions are enjoying more power and other regions are ignored. So internal critique, democratization within the voices of subaltern within the Muslim community, they must be promoted, they must be upheld. At the same time, we have to criticize hegemonic power, we have to criticize all forms of hatred, we have to criticize all anti-Muslims media campaign, and we as a brother, we as a sister and brother, as a member of global family, as a member of human society, we have to work collectively, and our effort should be to rise above our sectarian narrow identity, and we must go beyond the boundary of nation state, because our identity as a human being is supreme, is greater than any other identity. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We must collectively fight against Islamophobia. Muslim society, Islamic society has given a lot of great things to humanity, and we must feel proud of that. And any corruption which is there within Muslim society, any elite tendency, any cultural supremacy which is denying equal rights, the message of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about masawat, about ukhuwat, fraternity, equality, they we also need to oppose those elites, because if our society is not as strong, then we will not be able to fight injustice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abhay, for your views and your opinions. You have rightly underlined that one of the main issues with the Islamophobic narrative is that it is often based on misinformation and stereotypes, of course, rather than accurate information and evidence. And this has resulted in a distorted view of Muslim communities and created a rift within the societies and communities. So, therefore, it is essential to acknowledge and accept cultural, religious, ethnic, and racial diversity. So thank you so much for such a thought-provoking discussion with Dr. Abhay. I will now move on to our fourth speaker, Dr. Goldy M. George. He is a Dalit activist for nearly 3 decades, holds a PhD from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and has worked for promoting the rights of marginalized communities. Over the past 2 decades, Dr. George has conducted hundreds of training sessions and has been an active contributor to the national Dalit movement. Furthermore, he has contributed to the Dalit Adivasi Muvasi thought process, challenging existing predicaments on various aspects. Dr. George is an accredited thinker and has written over 100 articles, as well as contributing regularly to research journals on Dalit, Adivasi, and Muvasi issues. His work is widely cited in intellectual, scholarly, and other circles. Welcome, Dr. Goldy. We appreciate your presence here today and would like to extend an invitation for you to take the stage and begin your discussion. Please proceed. Thank you.
Been getting enlightened with two of the discussions. In fact, I heard both Obed and also Dr. Abhay. So while Abhay was speaking, I was getting fascinated because of a few things. Number one is that I'm not actually an expert on this whole notion of Islamophobia. And second is that I was happy that Abhay is speaking more because I have to speak less. I've been told it will end by 6:30. So that way also it. And the third reason is that because I've been moving around, running around for some other reasons. Therefore, I could not prepare a proper, kind of a presentation. So I apologize for that. But I just want to, in agreement to many of the things which Obed and Abhay spoke, in agreement to those things, I will just make a quick kind of understanding which comes into mind. Often when we talk about Islam or Muslims, so specifically speaking from an Indian context, it is pretty much okay. It is pretty much associated or connected with the notion of terrorism. So whenever anything, any sort of a problem happens in India, in any part of India. So the first question would be like, is that a Muslim? So that's the first question comes into everybody's mind. You can also see like there is a very consistent historical, cultural mechanism of stigmatization against Muslims, and there is a process by which this has now. It is more now getting legitimized. It's not just in social and cultural spaces, but it's also in legal spaces that one could see is getting legitimized that if there is any sort of a terrorist activity that is happening, definitely the person has to be from the Islamic background. So you could see like how over a period of time that this whole notion of adhering to a specific pattern of faith, there is a systemic mechanism by which there is in a way like you can see like creating a notion. As many of the previous speakers said, like this is not an instantly created notion. No, it's not a 9/11 notion. Honestly telling you, it is not just 9/11. This whole idea, this whole framework, frames of reference had remained in the air, in existence, in the rhythm, in the songs for a longer period of time. And you can see that if you look at if you look at the way many times history has been framed in the history books, and if you look at the language of framing history, you can see that how this history has been framed. Like Muslims came from outside, particularly in India, Muslims came from outside. The simple question is that where did the Kshatriya king come from, and whose land is after all this India we're talking about? So without having a more either subjective or objective study, people come up with a certain pattern of analysis. And this pattern of analysis that we can trace from history has continued, but it is becoming like a bigger form right now. So that's the stage that we have arrived at, where you can see that language has now magnified to a level where you can say any sort or any form of any wrongful activity is strictly connected with Islam and the Islamic faith. So this is like a very strict thing that you can see. Therefore, what has happened is that you can see that in all spaces of democracy, this Islamophobia is right now being legitimized. It's not only in India, it's not only just in Asia. It is very much in the Western countries. You can see, that is being, legitimized. Whether it is in the judiciary, whether it is the legislative, whether it is the executive, and whether it's the media, you can see that it is getting legitimate space. So any kind of wrongful activity, it must be some Muslim groups. Is there some Muslim connection? So that's the first thing a journalist would look. It's the first thing a police officer would look into. It's the first thing that a politician would look into, whether he's from a right wing or a non-right wing. We don't have too many left wing governments in the world. So it's either a right wing or it may be like a little right of the center or perhaps to the center. We don't even have too many political formations in the world at the moment, which is like somewhere around the center. So these kind of right, in fact, right of the center, or more far right or extreme right of the center, these kind of fundamentalist fanatics and kind of organizations, they have systematically taken up a wrongful narrative from history where Muslims were consistently pitted against for anything that has been wrong. This whole narrative has been reframed and repoured in a much magnanimous way, in a much enlarged format in the current phase of history. So one of the key things that we can see. Now, coming back to looking at the history, I would just want to make a point. All history, all historians, and all people who have been part of writing the history has had always had a specific agenda they bring in. For instance, a Brahmin writing the history of India would always say that India has been for the golden age of the world. I mean, India has been like the what is that the Vishwa Guru or the Sonaka Chidiya, kind of the golden bird that the world has never seen. It's a farce. It has been time and again proved in the history that it is a wrong. Buddha proved it's wrong. The Sant Ravidas proved it is wrong. Kabir said it is wrong. So you can see this false narratives were decoded by many of them. Phule said it is wrong. Ambedkar said it is wrong. Perez said it is. So in a similar pattern, what perhaps did not happen with the Islamic world or Muslim world is that there was no decoding. There was nobody to counter and tell them this is wrong. The narrative that you bring in about the Muslims, what are the narratives? As outsiders, as intruders, these are the narratives that you could see in different parts of history. So as outsiders, as intruders, as unwanted people. So outsiders, intruders, unwanted people doing terrorism, like propagating terror attacks and wrongful things. So you can see this kind of. So what has happened is, in the current phase of history, that has been taken as the normal, the new normal. That the new normal. So that is the new model of terrorism. The model of terrorism revolves around the idea of Islam. So that's the danger that we have actually arrived at. So what I'll just conclude in one moment. I can see the organizers getting anxious about my talk. So I'll just finish in my one and a half minutes at the most. So I look at it. How do I look at it? See, this whole Islamophobia, the notion of Islamophobia needs a very critical study. It needs a historical study, and it is needed to be, in fact, decoded right from the way, like the idea of varnashram and caste was decoded, right from the moment from Buddha to the present. In the similar format, there is some people need to intervene. Really, we need to intervene and tell the world that there is a decodification that we have to do. So that's the current way that we need to, and it's a challenge. So it's a challenge for the people who are going to do that. Then it's a challenge for those people. It's a challenge to the world itself that we are not what you are thinking of. So in a way, Islamophobia is a form. It's a very strict and it's a very rigorous and rigid form of discrimination and disparity based on faith. It's a faith, it's a discrimination and disparity. It's a new form of discrimination, disparity, and keeping people away based on faith. In the same pattern, you could see. I mean, it's in the same line. The way you could see, disparity and discrimination in the name of caste, or in the name of origin, your race, in the name of your identity, in the name of your gender. So you can see that it's not religion. In fact, it's more, I'll call it, in the name of faith. So it's in the name of faith there is discrimination. That in the name of faith, discrimination needs an answer in the name of faith. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. George. You have truly presented the thought-provoking views, and as you have already mentioned, that it is important to recognize that such a narrative is both factually inaccurate and perpetuates harmful stereotypes and biases against Muslims. Like any other group of people, Muslims are not responsible for all the problem in the world, obviously, and it is essential to challenge any harmful narratives that perpetuate discrimination and prejudice against marginalized groups, including Muslims. So we have a question right now from Furqan Ahmed, right? Furqan, you can continue with your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rimsha, for providing me the opportunity. My question to Professor Oscar is that what steps can EU member states take to support Muslim communities in combating discrimination and promoting their cultural and religious identity?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's a complex question. Okay, one answer is that there is a anti-discrimination law and anti-discrimination directives at the level of the European Union. And for example, these comprise discrimination by religion, by ethnic origin. And for example, there is an interesting case in the European Court of Justice in which they have to decide if a dismiss of a Muslim worker for wearing a veil is a case of direct discrimination of racial direct discrimination or ethnic racial discrimination or religious discrimination. And the court says there is no direct discrimination. It could be an indirect discrimination if there is no policy of neutrality. However, the second part of the question is quite complex because depend of the type of secularism of each country. It's not the same France as Spain or United Kingdom. Well, now United Kingdom is not in the European Union, or Germany, because, for example, the question of the Muslim veil or the question of the accommodation of the Muslim workers is different if the country has an active secularism, like France, in which there is no religious signs in the public sphere, or Spain, that it's a different situation in which religion is promoted by the state in some cases, or is protected by the state in some cases, especially Catholic Church, but also the religious minorities are protected by the state, including Muslims. And then Muslim veil is protected or is treated differently than in the French case, no? However, I think there is another line in this question, that is hate speech and the extreme right. And in Europe, there is a strong extreme right movement. And this extreme right movement is against immigration, and especially is against Muslim immigration. This discussion between extreme right immigration, extreme right Muslim immigration, I think is one of the question of the symbols, of question of identity, and is the question of the most important source of a stereotype, a prejudice against Muslim immigrants. And I think this is a question of human rights, and this is a question that we have to be aware and we have to be careful in order to protect Muslim immigrants in Europe, Muslim minorities in Europe. I think I have answered the question that have been asked to me.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for providing us your detailed answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Oscar. Thank you so much, Dr. Goldy, for such views you have presented prior to Dr. Oscar's answer. And I would now like to welcome Ms. Sumbul Yousuf, the Associate Project Director of SARIM, to deliver her concluding remarks for this webinar. Please proceed with Sumbul.
Thank you so much to all the respected participants, Dr. Oscar, Dr. Obed, Dr. Abhay Kumar, Dr. Goldy, for their participation. This had been really useful discussion on Islamophobia, and it has, of course, contributed to the cause of challenging and combating Islamophobia in the context of, for what we have arranged the webinar, the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, which was, as mentioned by Dr. Abhay, was declared as the Global Day by the UN in 2022. So as mentioned by all our speakers, Islamophobia is a very systematic way of discrimination against the Muslim community, and not only Muslims, but also people who tend to look like Muslims, or a show of Muslim identity is also subjected to discrimination. And it's not only a private act, as mentioned by Dr. Manwatkar, that it's not only hate speech and assaults or vandalizing. It is actually propagated very much through narratives created by media, by policing, discriminatory policing, which in turn legalizes the private Islamophobic acts. So it goes like a chain. And I appreciate all the definitions and discussion that came on Islamophobia, defining it and describing its historical and conceptual perspective, how we can understand it better. Because as Dr. Goldy mentioned also, that this is not only a 9/11 phenomena. It has much deeper roots. It has much longer history, and actually it is based on, or made to base on, the fears on a historical basis, and the fears of future demographic changes. So all of this contribute to a very systematic sort of exclusion of Muslims, as Dr. Oscar also mentioned, of Muslim community, and it affects their inclusion in politics and society, and it bars justice to reach them. So there have been many useful suggestions on combating and challenging this Islamophobic trend that has been on rise, not in one part of the world, but in all parts of the world. So, and as Dr. Oscar also mentioned, every country and every region has its own context, its own historical reasons for having that Islamophobic trends, but somehow 9/11 kind of globalized that problem, and now we see Islamophobia as a global threat to especially the minority Muslim communities in the world. And as suggestions, what we had was a very powerful suggestion that we need to decode those falsely based narratives, historical perspectives, and the feeding of threat perception by media, by politicians, the fear of domination by extremist Muslims, and the stereotypes of Muslims not providing rights to women. And what is very important here, as mentioned by almost all the participants, that Islam and Muslim communities are not a monolith as shown by these hate mongers. There are different values, there are different opinions, different streaks of opinion. So it is very wrong to think of them as a monolith in any terms. Another important point that I would like to reiterate, Dr. Abhay Kumar had mentioned, that narratives against Islamophobia should not be used by the Muslim elites to silence the voices of downtrodden communities within the Muslim communities. So we agree with the point that any society, may it be the belonging to the Hindus or the Muslims or in South Asia, even in the Western communities, we don't have egalitarian societies, perfect egalitarian. So we need to have continue discussions on how to, bring egalitarianism and social justice within our communities as well. So any type of phobia, may it be Hindu phobia or Islamophobia or any type of say anti-Semitism, should not erase or silence the discussion on injustices within those communities. But at the same time, the narratives that are spread to actually create or sustain the systems of political injustices and economic injustices, which is actually, it is defined as racial xenophobia and a systematic system of injustice. So these are actually the tools to, perpetuate systems of those injustice. So they should not also be silenced, and we need to decode the hateful narratives. So I'm again very, very grateful to all our participants. To name them again, Dr. Oscar Pérez, Dr. Obed Manwatkar, Dr. Abhay Kumar, Dr. Goldy George. I'm very, very thankful for all of your opinions. Goodbye from our side.
Thank you so much, Sumbul, for beautifully summarizing all the key points our speakers have mentioned throughout this webinar. And as we now reach the end of this webinar, I would like to take a moment to express our appreciation for the valuable insights and experiences shared by our speakers. It is our hope that the discussion and strategies shared today will inspire meaningful change in our communities and contribute to a more inclusive and accepting society. As we conclude this webinar, we want to emphasize the importance of taking action to challenge Islamophobia and promote inclusivity. It is surely vital that we continue to educate ourselves and others as well about fostering interfaith dialogue and collaboration, challenging harmful stereotypes and narratives, and promoting diversity and inclusivity in all aspects of society. Once again, we want to express our gratitude to all our speakers for contributing to this important discussion. We hope to see you in our future events as we continue to address and challenge important social issues. Thank you and have a great day to all.